Mathias Rosenzweig.
Thank you so much for having me, Jeremy McClain.
Thank you for being here,
It's my
bestie.
it's my pleasure. I've never actually been interviewed about my job before, so I would only let a best friend do it. So this is like very low bar for me.
Well, what an honor. I think it's about time that we've heard your side of the story. Oddly, I've known you for years, and obviously you've been working at the magazines for years, but we never talk about work because
Mm.
we just don't. I think when we were both also working at fashion, it was just like anything but work, please.
Yeah, and I think we were also just having such similar experiences that it was like it kind of just a lot of stuff went without saying if you know what I mean. Like we did
Totally.
Milan Fashion Week together back when you were like wrangling models, and I feel like we would just spend our days with all the chaos and going to the shows, and then at night we just wanted to like have dinner and get drunk and talk about anything but the shows. So,
Yes, and it was perfect.
and it was perfect. I really look back on that fondly.
So we'll just hop into it, right? For
Hmm.
the audience here, tell me, how did you first get into journalism slash editing? Obviously, I already know the answer, but
Yeah. Well, this part you actually like might not know, but I got into it in high school. I almost forgot about that until I was sort of like prepping for this and trying to remember. But my best friend in high school, whose name is Jeannie, I think you've maybe even met her, but
Genie, yeah.
she she was just like taking a journalism class and she had to do the school newspaper as sort of a part of that. And I was like looking for an extracurricular to do, you're like doing everything you can to basically get into a good college. And she was like, I'm gonna do newspaper, just like do it with me. And I really had no actual interest in it. It was just something I was doing because like my bestie was doing it and I was like, okay, sure, we can like hang out. Um, but I actually like really fell in love with it. I loved every element of it. Like I loved interviewing people and connecting with people. I loved the writing aspect of it. This was like a printed newspaper. This was in 2009, just our school paper. And I remember like the first time I saw my name in print and I just thought that was like the coolest thing. Or having people like actually read the stuff that I wrote, which I mean was so bad. I think it was like they were repaving the high school parking lot and I like interviewed like a construction worker. I mean, they were stories that nobody actually cared about. But I kind of just, yeah, fell into it that way. And then when I got to New York, it didn't seem like a very practical path. I really did not understand how to get into magazines, and that's also just the question that I get the most often from people is how do you actually break in? It's a really small industry, and I honestly realized that basically, this is before social media. You just had to go out and you had to meet editors and you had to get them to like you and to get them to think you were interesting and to get them to hire you to write for them. So after I moved to New York and realized that I really did want to be working in publications somehow, I was just partying a lot. I was also barely DJing. I mean, you know how it was back in the day when we were all sort
Oh,
of
yeah.
DJing. And that sort of led to me getting my first like byline, which was a music column. But it really did start with the newspaper in high school, and then ultimately, I mean, I always wanted to be a writer, and I had really studied the lives of people that I sort of wanted to emulate, and that included like Joan Didion, the late author, and she got her start working at Vogue. And a lot of major authors who became very celebrated writers were first like fashion writers. So I kind of decided, okay, I think I'm going to work for fashion magazines for a while, and then that'll be a bit of like a stepping stone. But yeah, I would say since I was 17 or 18, I always knew, and now I'm 34 and I'm doing the same thing. So I think this is sort of it for me.
Yeah, and what a great job you're doing.
I
Crushing
mean,
it.
thank you, I guess. I think it's definitely the kind of thing where you always feel like you can be doing more. I mean, I think with anybody when you have these dreams when you're young and then when you accomplish them, it feels great, but it's always about sort of like what's next. But yeah, I mean, I'm still really happy with it. The industry is insane. We'll get into how all of that works, but um, yeah, it's a lot of fun and it's still very fulfilling. And the magazine I'm with now, I've been with them for 7 years, and I'm very happy with it. So I think that says something also.
Amazing. I was going to ask you how long it's been now because it just seems like it's been forever.
Yeah, I mean, it's been almost a decade. I sort of really got my start freelancing. So, well, to the listeners, Jeremy and I were both living downtown in New York, and there were all like the downtown magazines that were so prominent back then. So, Paper Magazine, Interview Magazine, V Magazine, galore at the time. I mean, there were just so many really cool publications going on, and I was freelancing for all of them. But I really wanted to become an editor instead, so I got this job at V, and yeah, it's been 7 years. We do V, we do VMAN. We had a magazine called Gen V. We have a couple new magazines that are launching soon. So even though it's like one company, I've been able to work on all these different platforms, which has been really nice. But yeah, long
Amazing.
time.
Yeah, it's so funny because V is just this sort of like looming presence for me and my whole time in New York and even now, like a welcomed loom, but of course. But it's such a funny thing because I mean I know I've told you this before, but my first roommate in New York when I moved there when I was 20 was the special projects manager or something. Two of them actually worked for V,
Hmm.
Kiko and Javier. And I remember like meeting them because I had V was one of those first magazines that you could see it like Barnes and Nobles or like whatever sort of random bookstore in the
Hmm.
suburbs that I grew up in. So that was my first intro into fashion. And
Yeah.
so when I found out that they worked at V, you're just like starstruck, like, oh my god, this is so cool that I have to live in this space with these guys and be in, this will be my in to this world. I'm so excited, as a new fashion student in New York. And I went to the V offices to sign my first lease, which is
Oh
crazy,
wow. Oh my
with
God,
my
I haven't seen
parents.
that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I went there with my parents, signed my first lease, and my first door boy event was a V party that Javier had hired me for. I had no clue what I was doing. I didn't know who any. I mean, I know who people were, but I wasn't so well versed in like maybe more behind the scenes sort of people quite
Hmm.
yet. So there was a lot of do you know who I am? And as you know, this is the time. This is the time before people had to be nice. By the way, this is like a
Yeah.
long time ago.
Yeah.
So people were mean and proud about it.
Yeah. Definitely. I mean, I
So
even just I worked at a restaurant, when I was writing stuff for free, which was a big part of my career also, just to break in. And I was a host at a restaurant that was across from the store that you worked in. And even just hosting at the restaurant back then, that was like, 2007, 2008. It was very like, do you know who I am? Everybody wanted a table. And I'm like, I'm a child. I don't know who any of you are. I was like, I'm 19. So no, I don't know who you are. But yeah, New York was very that way. It's funny that you say that you signed your lease in the office because there's been so many like iconic moments in the old V office. So the same table where you would have signed your lease is also the table where they filmed the scene in Sex and the City when Charlotte's like deciding that she doesn't want to work in the gallery anymore and they hire this like young gallerist to replace her. That all of those interviews and that whole scene that was all shot in the V office, like in the conference room where you would have signed your lease. So
what?
yeah, it's there's so many stories like that that really make V such a like New York fixture and just kind of like cultural fixture that I'm so proud to be a part of in any way. I mean, there's a part of my brain that's like, I'm not really a part of this, even after 7 years because it's just so I don't know, there's so much there. You like we were the first magazine that gave Beyonce a solo cover. We were one of the first magazines that put Lady Gaga in the issue. First magazines that shot Gigi. I mean, some of that's not New York, but um, it's there's just so many little like anecdotes like that. And I do think if you were in downtown New York and sort of part of the culture in any way, everyone has some connection to V. You probably worked there. Like everyone has also like worked at V at some point.
Everyone's worked at V. Yeah.
Everyone has worked at V. I mean, I live in Lisbon, Portugal now, and I was out to dinner the other night and like started talking to the table next to me, and this guy was like, "I used to throw parties for V back in the early 2000s," and I was like, "Sure," some Portuguese guy who used to live in New York, and that just happens all the time. So, it's very much like this like extended family that yeah, has some sort of fixture in a lot of New Yorkers' lives. So even though I don't live there anymore, I get to work for like a very New Yorky company, and that kind of helps me keep like one foot in the door, you know.
Yeah, we're all part of the V family, no matter where we are.
We're part of the V family. Even if you just buy V, which like thank you, then you know you're part of the family. So it you know it does have that sort of community vibe. And that's really one of the fun parts of it, you know, the social part and sort of like the historical parts like that.
Yeah. What was your first sort of byline memory or moment you sort of felt like, wow, I'm really doing this?
Yeah. I mean, you know, like now obviously looking back, it's like nothing, but I was so proud of it at the time. But I I went to NYU and I graduated, and my parents were kind enough to like support me during college, and then they were like, "You're getting cut the fuck off because we don't have money like that." And so I got a job in advertising. I think I was getting paid like $12 an hour, and I think it was technically an internship. And I was really like hustling and trying to become a writer, and I had a friend, an old editor, well, older than me editor, who had also worked at V at some point, named Jacob Brown. And back because I was, you know, DJing here and there, he was working at a magazine called Black Book. And they were just like, would you want to do a music column for us? We just need you to pick like 5 songs every week and write about them for us, 5 new songs. Um, you know, this was probably in like 2013, and I remember the very first one because also um, Charlie XCX was just starting to happen. I put one of her songs in it, and I spelled her name with an E after the I, and I remember her publicist emailing me being like, "There's no E, please take that off." And that was the first email I've ever gotten from a publicist. So I remember that very well. But I was literally like waking up at like 5 or 6 to write these articles before I was going into work to actually make the money that I needed to pay my rent because the articles weren't even paying me. And I remember the first time I saw that column come up with, you know, the 5 songs. And I did that every week for a while. And immediately publicists started reaching out, pitching their artists for that column. And I just thought it was the coolest thing that like some stranger was emailing me being like, "Hey, like there's like a private showcase of this pianist if you want to come to this rooftop in Brooklyn." And I went, and you know, there was like free beer, and I was like, "Oh my God, this is amazing," you know. So it happened really fast, but yeah, that music column was the first byline, and it was something that I kind of had gotten from being a DJ in New York, which I think I did like 3 times, and I use Spotify, so
It's so fun. I mean, yeah, we were all iPad DJs. We were all iPad DJs,
we
okay?
were all iPad DJs. It's so true.
But we did it and it was cool. It was cool for then.
It was really cool for that, and you know, people didn't really know. Like, it wasn't about like being some high tech crazy DJ like in the clubs in New York. It was about like you know playing Katy Perry and Madonna and Sky Ferreira and just sort of like knowing the right tracks. I mean, nobody gave a shit. A lot of the really like famous club DJs from that time, and I won't name names, but like they hired people to do all their mixes for them, and they sort of just stood there and pretended, and like we all knew that was the case.
Yes.
It doesn't make them like a bad DJ or anything. They were still curating, which I think was the most important part. But yeah, I think we were all sort of faking it a little bit. Um,
Personally, I think that's genius. I mean, work smarter, not harder.
Work smarter, not harder. Yeah, like get a task rabbit to make your mix for you or whatever we used to do, and like you know that's great. But yeah. So anyway, that was the first byline. I was really like a music journalist at first, going from there, and then I fell into fashion like totally by accident. I think any of my friends, including you, knew that I was maybe not the most fashionable person. It wasn't the space I saw myself getting into, but I was always covering musicians for fashion magazines. So then the same thing started happening for like Vogue and other fashion publications. I was just always writing about musicians. And then at some point, someone mistook me as a fashion writer because I was working with fashion publications, and I just kind of went along with it. But it wasn't my plan for sure. But yeah, it all started with music. I mean, I loved going out and clubbing and listening to music and all of that. You know, that was really how it started.
But also, I think that's why this position has suited you and, continues to suit you so well, is because you were never super into fashion. But so I
Mhm.
think that it gives you this perspective of like, you're not some obsessive coming into it. It's like, it just feels like a very like natural, not carefree or careless by any means, but
Kind of. I know
you
what
know
you
what I mean? Like, yeah.
mean. I mean, I think it's like one of those things where you try to turn like a weakness into a strength. Like, because when I first got into fashion, I mean, my first day on the job with V was me landing in Milan and doing Fashion Week. And when I tell you I knew nothing, like I knew nothing. I got to the hotel and there were a bunch of you get to your hotel and there's like 20 invitations waiting for you for all of the shows. They send physical invites to your hotel. And I remember seeing the Dolce& and Gabbana invite, and I was like, "Oh yeah, I guess that's an Italian brand." You know, I just had like never, I knew Dolce& and Gabbana, but I'd never even like thought about it. And so the first couple of years, I was so insecure because you're like around all these fashion editors who are diehards and they always wanted to be in fashion. The ones who could be like, "Oh, 2002 Marc Jacobs this season," and they knew everything. And I literally knew nothing, and I would just fake it, and I was just kind of good at like bullshitting. And then as soon as I sort of like let my guard down a couple years later and was just like, I have no fucking idea what's going on like in this industry at all. I found that people actually like started to respect that and respected my opinion in a way because I was a little bit closer to like the shopper, the person who would maybe actually be in the store looking at the collection and like buying something rather than like a fashion historian like all the people around me. So I mean for lack of better words, I was able to kind of like keep it real in that way. But I was really, intimidated at first, and now I've just leaned into that. Like I remember when Eddie Slimane was taking over Celine. It was this big announcement. It happened during Fashion Week, and I kept going to dinners and shows, and people would be like, "What do you think about Eddie? What do you think about Eddie?" And I was like, "I don't think about Eddie." Like I was literally like, "I don't care." I was like, "I'll go to the show, I'll cover it, but like." This doesn't really consume me. I mean, I thought Eddie Slimane was a blogger um, when I was in high school. Like, I had backgrounds. My background on my computer was Ash Stymist by Eddie Slimane, and I literally just thought the guy was a blogger. Since then have had like dinner with him more than once. Lovely, very inspiring person, but I had no idea, and I've kind of stuck to that. So yeah, I mean, I really fell into it. It's how I make it's a job. It's how I made my money, essentially.
That's
My
great.
heap
And
of money, all the money,
all the money, honey, because everyone knows that if you want money, get into fashion.
Exactly, and especially be a writer
Yeah,
because
especially.
especially if you want to make a lot of money. But yeah, so it even though like becoming a writer and editor was definitely the plan, I think the way that it actually manifested and also especially being a fashion editor of any sort was so unplanned for me, but it's so much fun. I think that things like even if I'm and of course like I love clothes and I'm interested in that too, but I love going to a show and I love the music. Like the shows, they spend so much time curating like an amazing soundtrack and the sort of like stage setting. What's that called in acting? I don't know. Like the
The set setting.
this set, yeah, I guess like the set and just, all of that. Like it's so many different things beyond just the fashion. There's so many like artists and musicians and the casting agents and the stylists. It's the clothes are there, but you build a whole world around the clothing, and that was always like the most interesting to me. So it's just such a fun, industry to be a part of, even if it wasn't the plan. And might not even be the long-term plan. It's what I'm doing for now, but who knows in the future.
Yeah. Well, 7 years in, you got to keep going.
Mhm.
As you said, you have a new sort of prep style depending on who it is. How does that sort of differentiate between person to person about how you prep between one
Mm.
person and another person? Is it like the project or just what they have coming out or
I definitely do prep different for like whoever I'm speaking to. I mean, if someone has a movie or an album coming out, of course you need to like watch it or listen to it. It's so like disrespectful to not even check out whatever they're doing. So I definitely do that with prep. if it's like a newer artist or something, I mean, there's usually not that much information about them anyway, and people don't necessarily know them. So I'll prep for those less because it's really just like my job is to sort of translate that to our readers who also don't know this person. So I'm sort of just trying to ask the questions maybe they would, and it's more organic. If it's going to be somebody like Lady Gaga, who has done so much, and you really need to know your shit. But I'm not really like a little monster. I mean, I love her and she's great, but I don't know every little thing. I definitely will do a lot of prep for that because I'm like, I can't make an ass of myself and not know something.
Yeah, you need to arrive claws up, honey.
Yeah, you need to arrive claws up for sure. So I mean it's so case by case, and I think the other side of it is like also I will watch interviews of whoever I'm about to interview on YouTube just to sort of feel their energy out. It's good to know if somebody is a little bit shy, if somebody is a little bit, unintentionally short, and I don't mean in a mean way, but just more that they're you ask them something and they'll just sort of be like, yeah, I loved it and he was great. And, that's their whole answer. So I do actually try to watch interviews people have done before and feel out their energy. And then I know, like, okay, this person's a talker. Like, I'm going to ask one question and they're going to go on for 5 minutes. And those are great. Those are the best interviews. Or I have to prepare a little bit to, like, pull stuff out. So, I mean, whether I guess you're working for magazines or podcasting or like whatever, if you're dealing with someone who has been interviewed before, I do suggest that that's just like such a great hack to kind of see what their vibe is when they're being questioned. So that's a little trick of mine. But yeah, you prep differently for everybody, and they all prep differently for you. Some people are very media trained, some people are not media trained, at all.
Yeah, I mean, plus it's also like so much of how that person is even feeling that day. I mean, they're in the middle of a press tour or,
For
an
sure.
album cycle, and it's just like they know they have this time allotted for V magazine, so they know that it's a big magazine, and they know they have to come in and give a certain energy or whatever. But so many people, it's like you don't know what kind of energy you're meeting that person with the day, and it might not be their best day. Like,
Totally. No, that's so true. And also, like, it might not be my best day. I mean, that matters less because I'm not the focus of the interview or whatever. But you can have a hard day or whatever it is, and you need to speak to some massive celebrity for a half hour and just sort of put a smile on and try to get into an engaging conversation. So I can imagine it would be the same um, for them, also. But yeah, you truly don't know. I mean, one thing I also try to do if it feels right is like I will not necessarily, just jump into the interview. Like there was a Swedish singer who I was interviewing, and I had basically there's a story about this on Vogue Scandinavia. People can look it up if they want. But I basically had this insane ghosting story. I like went on a couple dates with someone and then they ghosted me in like the most insane way ever. And I wrote this article about it. But I was sitting down with this singer, Sinabose is her name. She's a great Swedish singer. And she was just like, oh, like, how are you liking Stockholm so far? And, just sort of small talk. And I just launched into this, like, very personal story about getting ghosted, But I mean, that's just sort of who I am. I mean, I over speak and I overshare and, whatever. But I think it sort of serves a purpose because it does just make it feel very, like, real, and a little bit less professional, where I'm like, we just met and I'm telling you about my dating life and like not even like a story that makes me seem cool. I'm like, this guy ghosted me. Like, what's going on? And I just think that like set the tone for the interview, and then it was just like a really fun conversation back and forth, So um I have found that there's a lot of writers who, you think you're supposed to just disappear from the story. We're not even supposed to write I or me. You're never supposed to say first person. You shouldn't say like Seinabose said to me. The writer is always sort of supposed to disappear in the piece, and I don't really do that anymore. I sort of make myself like an active part of it. And in the conversations, I try to make myself an active part of it, where maybe they share an experience and I share mine. And I'm not going to write about mine in the interview, but again, it's just to sort of say, I understand what you're saying. I relate to you. You're a human. I'm a human. We're just flesh and blood, at the end of the day. So yeah, that's a little bit about the approach that I have.
Well, good to know.
Yeah. But I mean, again, I've never been interviewed. So now being on this side of things, I'm a little bit like, I feel for everyone, all the hundreds of people I've interviewed. I mean, not that it's just a different experience. It is a conversation, but you're also thinking more about like your words and what you're saying. And I get why people get media trained, which is a really big thing.
No, of course.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of which, I wanted to ask you if any, if you're allowed to spill,
Hmm.
tell me any funny or awkward behind the scenes stories from
Yeah.
an interview.
I sure have one. I'm grabbing my phone because I wrote like a couple of things down. This was like traumatic going through because some of these things I was like, oh my God, that did really happen. Um, I think uh, this wasn't even really the question, but I think my most traumatic interviewing experience, which was totally my fault. So this one I can really like talk about, but I was supposed to not even do the interview. I was supposed to moderate a conversation between Andra Day and Lee Daniels. Lee Daniels is the director of Precious. Andra Day, very famous singer. She starred in his movie, I think it's called The United States versus Billie Holiday. Andra was playing Billie Holiday. I live in Portugal. I'm like 9 hours ahead of LA or 8 hours ahead of LA or something. And this call was going to happen at like midnight my time. And I was like, that's fine. I had the longest day. I think at like 9, I was like, I'm going to just take a quick nap. I'm going to like get my shit together and then I'm going to wake up and I'm going to do this conversation. I set my alarm for the wrong time. I put like PM instead of AM. Andre Day and Lee Daniels were on the phone waiting for me to get on the phone, and I was snoozing. I just was in Dreamsville, totally out of it, and I woke up and I've never felt my heart like sink fast. Like I woke up to all these texts from his camp, her camp, the V camp, Greg Krellenstein, who and does like our bookings, had set up the conversation, and everybody was like, "Where are you?" So I literally am like by far the least important person on this call. No one on this call even knows what my fucking name is. And I don't show up. And they had to reschedule the call. We had to do it again later. And I have to say, they were so nice about it. And they were so like professional, which I was not because I slept through the call. But they were just sort of like, oh, that's okay. Like we got to just catch up a little bit and it's fine. But I was traumatized and I've never slept through a single thing since. I tried to just stop sleeping in general. I was just like, I can't miss anything in my life ever again.
Oh,
So that was pretty terrible, but that was my fault. I've never really had, to be honest, I've really never had an interview where I found someone to be like terrible. You know what I mean? Like
mm.
no one's ever been rude in some insane way. I think I've been, pretty fortunate in that regard. People have not shown up and people have rebooked and then rebooked and then rebooked and then eventually I'm like, we're, not doing this anymore. So I guess maybe it's because some of the people that would have been terrible just ended up like not showing up anyway, and so I never ended up speaking with them. But I can't really think of anyone where I walked away being like, I hate that person. Um, and then on the other side of things, I mean, I just posted about this the other day because I have been doing this for 12 or 13 years or something, and it is at the point where sometimes someone will be like, have you ever interviewed Doja Cat? And I'll be like, I don't think so. It's like it's so many people and so many things that I'm not sure, but I'm trying to sort of like archive things and remind myself. And so I've been going through old interviews and like I recently posted on Instagram, the best one I ever did was definitely Dolly Parton because
Ah,
she was just everything you would want her to be. I think you saw this because I did post about it on Instagram, but I basically got a call like 3 minutes before she was gonna call me, and I picked up, and it was this guy, and he was like, "Hi, like I'm Dolly Parton's manager. How do you pronounce your name? Like she wants to know how you say your name." And I was like, "Matthias." And then he was like, "Okay, thanks," and hung up. And then 3 minutes later, when the interview was supposed to happen, I got a call. And always, 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 it's like a manager or publicist who calls you, and then they hand the phone over to the talent. I picked up the phone and I just heard like, "Hi, Matthias," and it was just like her off the bat. And I was just so like no one, let alone Dolly Parton. And I have a my name has a silent H, nobody knows how to say it. Like no one's ever done that except for like the biggest name, you know. And she was just so professional and so kind, and she would ask me questions back when I was asking her questions, and she was just really, really funny. Um, she was just really one of those people where like you understand why they are where they are just through having a conversation with them, where you're just like you're so charismatic, you're so funny, and you're so talented, and you're so professional. And it was just a dream. So I mean that was a great one for sure. And then we were talking about Gaga before. She was also amazing. She was just so incredibly like thankful. It was just the strangest thing because she kept being like, "Thank you so much for making space for me today and for speaking with me today." And I was like, "Bitch, what the fuck? Like, you're Lady Gaga." Like, I was like, "Why the fuck are you thinking?"
Thank you.
Yeah, I was like, "Thank you," but she's really that way. Like, she kind of always sounds like she's slightly on the verge of tears, and she was just really emotional and grateful. And yeah, again, it felt like a conversation, you know, not just an interview, which is always nice. So I really can't think of that many bad ones, but except for the one where I slept through it, but I have a lot of really fond memories and like recordings that I'm trying to find. Like I have so many interviews with people and you know, you transcribe it and I'm like, where's that recording? Like when I'm 80, I'm gonna want to listen to like, you know, the convo with Dolly Parton. I don't know where any of that shit is.
I was literally gonna ask, like, I hope that you have that as like some sort of recorded greeting on your like for your voicemail or something. I don't know.
I, they're somewhere. Like I think they're all like in my old email. I think I would email myself the recordings, but like I don't know where they are. And you know, especially now that I'm working for, well, actually, I mean, I'm working for a print magazine, but even um, two of the websites where I did a bunch of interviews. One was milk.xyz, another one was Black Book. They don't even exist anymore. All my interviews were wiped off the internet. Those websites, like, it's not like they kept things, but they stopped writing. They're gone, and I didn't save them. So, I mean, thankfully now, I guess, again, with social media and stuff, we're so much better at, like, recording and, like, digital archiving, which I really suggest everybody does because, you know, you just lose things otherwise. But I really need to like find those conversations. I'm sure there's a lot more stories that I'm not even remembering, but like I said, I'm just kind of an airhead. I was a pothead for like 10 years, so like I don't really remember anything.
Love it. Well, please find that Dolly clip and send it to me, please,
I
because
have
I
to.
just want to hear her saying your name.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, me too. I need to find that and I need to find a couple of others. I did I mean I've heard different things about whether this is true or not. According to her publicist, I did Billie Eilish's first interview. I think it
Oh
maybe was her
wow.
first American interview. I think our friend Douglas, who works at ID, I think he maybe interviewed her for a school something before. But even that, you know, it was like I was speaking to her when she was 14, and I just remember being like, oh my God, I'm speaking to this like random little girl. She only had ocean eyes out, and I actually did find that recording recently because I was interviewing her again, and just wanted to try to like remember that conversation. But you know, it's just stuff like that where I'm like, that's something I want to have. You know, the way you want like a book on your shelf. I just sort of want to go and find all of those things. So I'm working on that now. But again, after like 12 or 13 years of doing this, there is a lot for me to go back and
You have
find.
a lot of archiving to do, hun.
I have a lot of archiving to do. I always thought like I was just gonna like marry a rich man and then I would like hire somebody to do that. But I'm like painfully single, so that hasn't happened yet. But it's still sort of the plan.
Yeah. No,
If you're a
we're
rich man,
working on it.
yeah, if you're a rich man and you're interested, like hit me up and
Hit
let
him
me
up.
and then let me use your money to find an archivist. Because I'm lazy, as Jeremy and I were speaking about before this. I try to work smart, not hard. So I don't want to deal with all that.
I feel you, babe. And that's why we're besties.
That's why we're besties.
um, I wanted to talk to you about more of the ins and outs of what it's actually on the day to day being like an editor in a magazine.
Mhm.
So, break down a typical day or week of what people don't kind of see? Is it Devil Wears Prada?
Um, I have said before that V and also a lot of other magazines are like the rated X version of Devil Wears Prada. I mean, Devil Wears Prada has nothing on the reality of it. It's changed now, but sort of like we were joking about before, this isn't about V, this is just about the industry. I think the industry was actually so much meaner than it was even shown to be in Devil Wears Prada. I mean, of course, that was very like cutthroat, but I'm like, you know, there's a lot more cursing and screaming and all of that stuff. That was back in the day. Now things have gotten a little bit more politically correct, but there's definitely still Devil Wears Prada elements. There's really insane requests and insane expectations. I won't say any names, but I mean, there was an editor who wanted to do a photo shoot on the moon, and we had to explain that, like, that's not possible. Like, we can hardly afford a studio, so, like, how are we gonna do a photo shoot on the moon? We had an editor who wanted to do a photo shoot with a unicorn, and they were like, and I don't want a horse with a horn on it. Like, I want us to get a real unicorn. And we had to be like, um, that doesn't exist. So, I mean, there are these very outrageous Devil Wears Prada kind of like demands that get thrown around, which I mean, it sounds unbelievable, but hand to God, these are all true stories. Um, but yeah, in terms of the day to day, it's very different at every magazine. The magazine is still an indie publication. We're like 10 people. We're not part of Condé Nast. We're not part of Hearst. We don't have any investors. So we work a little bit differently, probably, than most people. We don't try to compete with websites and publications that are like the first to publish news. We're a lot more about just curation and quality over quantity. So, for me, my average workday is basically like waking up, looking at the pitches that I've gotten from publicists, looking at whatever's going on that day. I have a team of about like 5 interns right now and a couple other writers, and I assign stories to them to cover that day. So that's sort of like the upkeep of the website and all of that stuff. That part's a little bit boring, to be honest, or just formulaic. The rest of it is like fun. I mean, I've had friends who heard me on like work calls, and they were like, "Was that a work call or were you talking to your friends?" Because a lot of it is just like getting on the phone with the other editors and being like, "Oh, did you see like Critiza Star's new music video? Have you seen this? Have you seen this? Should we do this with her?" And it's literally like meetings where we're sort of consuming the culture and then like trying to spit it back out in a V way, saying like, okay, well, what do we want to do with Ethel Kane, or what do we want to do with this artist, or where can we feature them, or looking at what other magazines are doing and making sure we're not copying them and sort of like being in the know. So, I mean, the fun part of the day to day of it, and the reason that I really do love this job, is because your job is just consuming culture. People are like, publicists are like, here's a hotel that just opened. Can we show you the hotel? Here's a restaurant that just opened. Here's a new song. Here's this. Here's that. And we're sort of just supposed to like use our taste to decide what fits for like the V audience. So a lot of the day to day is like sifting through content and culture and figuring out what's happening. Of course, there's setting up the photo shoots, there's dealing with the printers, scheduling interviews. I mean, there's a lot of different things um, that go into it, and definitely no 2 days are the same. I know everybody says that about their job, but it's just always very different.
Yeah, how do you manage the sort of, you spoke to this a little bit, but how do you manage the quickness of which everything happens now? Because it's so much faster than even when we both started 10 years ago with social media and whatnot.
Yeah.
It's eating itself as it's like happening. How do
hmm
you balance that?
Well, we always use the saying like you're building the plane while it's flying or whatever. Like it's you're always trying to keep up. I mean, and one of the things with V again is that we're not like breaking news necessarily. It's not really like our model. So a lot of publications have to deal with trying to figure out, clickbait and stuff that will really, drive the numbers up, and being the first to break news and doing all of this stuff. And it's really just not how we operate. we're not really like a news publication. So while that is going on around us, it's just not really our forte. I think the one thing I will say is that the media never stops. So like we're getting texts on Saturdays, on Sundays, at night, at midnight. If something happens, that's newsworthy. If some, major fashion designer passes away, if there's an award show, I mean, the media never stops. And especially on social media, we really do have to keep up with it. So maybe on the website's a little bit less, but I would say the way that we deal with it is just sort of being open-minded to the fact that like you're always kind of on. You might be out at your own birthday dinner, and if something major happens, you have to step out because you have to post something. That just kind of comes with the territory. If you're really into like boundaries and work-life balance, don't work for an indie magazine. If you like blending your life with your work so that that boundary doesn't have to exist so much, because maybe something major happens, but again, it's like your favorite designer passed away. You actually want to write something about that. It is your
Mm.
job, but you're also like, in my personal life, I also am interested in what's happening. You just have to kind of have that mindset. So you're always on. Things could happen at any minute, and that's sort of the best way that we can deal with it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you sort of said this earlier too, about print planning and digital planning. Like,
hmm
how does that work?
So, again, it's obviously different at different publications. Print planning happens a lot earlier than most people think. We upload an issue to the printers 1 month before it hits newsstands. So we have to be fully done 1 month before we hit newsstands. It takes a month to print and deliver. So if we're putting out a December issue, it's done by the end of October. We have to send it to the printers in November. So a December issue will be printing in like September and October. So we really have to be quite ahead of time. Sometimes we're like many issues ahead. We can maybe shoot a cover for an issue that's not coming out for 4 months, 4 months ahead, because that's when the celebrity was ready, or what have you. So print, of course, takes more planning, but just even more planning than most people realize. Um, Digital is fast. It's pretty immediate. And like I keep saying, we're not as fast as other publications. But also our approach to digital is quite different. If you look at something like Paper Magazine and their social media, they'll post memes, they'll post a lot of like Getty images and stuff. We almost never post anything that's not like an image that we took ourselves. That's just sort of been our brand guidelines, for lack of better words. So our print is like very tied into our digital platforms, and a lot of like what we're releasing on Instagram actually is coming from the print magazine a little while after it hits newsstands. So for us, like print and digital are very tied together. Um, and I think frankly, like being one of the last important indie print magazines, in a way has given us a bit of like an edge because frankly, a lot of our competitors went out of print. And there's a lot of advertisers that still only want print. There's a lot of celebrities that still only want to be on a print cover. So in a way, like people talk about, print dying, and that's sort of undeniable, but the ones that are still standing, now we have this niche that like maybe Louis Vuitton will want to do a project with us versus a digital only publication because the traditional people at Louis Vuitton still like love print, and
Mm.
so many people still love print. And it's sort of like, when a musician talks about they always will say this, and there's a good reason, but they're sort of like, I want my album to be like an experience. I want you to listen from the first song to the last song and not just listen to the singles. And with the print magazine, it's sort of that way too. Like, I'll take an old issue of V or Vogue or something off my bookshelf, and you flip through it, and it's like each issue is like its own whole thing. It's not the same as reading one article on a website. It's like this is one physical body of work that you get to go through, and there are these sort of timestamps of previous years. You look and you're kind of like, oh yeah, that was the year that Ultraviolence came out, Lana Del Rey's album, and it kind of is this like you remember what was happening in the culture then, and you're holding it in your hands, and the paper is smooth and it smells so nice and it's beautiful. I mean, everyone sort of knows this, but where print has gone is that they're more like collector's items now. So no magazine is printing as many issues as we all used to. But we're still printing the amount that's, being bought. And there are people who just, like you were just saying, they still want to like physically hold it. And I think that will always be a thing. And it's interesting because we think this is the way the whole world is, and it's not. In China, print magazines sell really, really well. So that's just sort of like that's a generalization that's not necessarily true, you know.
How do you balance sort of, and you spoke about this earlier briefly, but I wanted you to expand on sort of balancing brand integrity with digital speed, like clicks versus curation in the digital era.
For us, it's a bit of a boring answer because like our business model isn't super numbers oriented. We are, you go into a supermarket in the US and Cosmo is there, not V. And like the amazing thing about that for Cosmo or for L is that they have this insane readership that's just like so much of America. V is like a lot, smaller, and our audience is a little bit different and smaller as well. So we're not very clickbaity. Like I run our website and I do not care really how much traffic articles get. I'm interested in knowing. But a lot of like other publications, they care because that's how they make their money. They sell ads on the website and they need to get millions and millions of views. For us, advertisers just buy ads on our website just because they want to be associated with our brand. We don't even tell them like this is how many impressions you're going to get necessarily. Um, so I mean, thankfully, we don't have to do a lot of the sellout clickbaity stuff. Like you really just won't see that on our website. I think when it comes to the question of integrity, the thing that the industry is dealing with more is the advertorial space, where that just wasn't a thing. An advertorial, for anyone who doesn't know, is an ad essentially, or it's not an ad, but it's like when a brand sponsors a photo shoot. And it's meant to look very organic, but ultimately a brand is paying for it. And it's this weird gray zone between a real editorial and something that actually a brand is behind. Every magazine that's in business right now, I mean, that is what we're doing. And I think we're very conscious of saying, okay, this issue already has this many advertorials in it. We need a couple of real editorial shoots that are not sponsored, that are just organic. Maybe our fashion director, Nicola Formichetti, has an idea of a shoot he wants to do or some talent he wants. And it's a matter of balancing out what we're getting paid for just what we actually want to be putting out. And readers are smart. If you go through a magazine and there's a whole photo shoot that's they're only wearing Louis Vuitton, and then there's another photo shoot where they're only wearing Loewe, like it becomes very clear. So I think for us, the question of integrity comes more from, it's art versus commerce. How much are we just doing what we want to do and creating art, and how much are we making things that we're getting paid for?
Hmm.
Um, my favorite cover that I've ever worked on was the one we did with Ethel Kane, which Stephen Klein shot. And there was not an advertiser in sight. And that was an expensive photo shoot. And we had other shoots in the issue that helped us to pay for that one. But, we're very strict about making sure that like not every cover is sponsored, not every shoot is sponsored, because you do have to have some authenticity still, or else you're just a catalog. You're just a
Hmm.
catalog and everything's paid for and you're at the mercy of all these advertisers. So I don't deal with the clickbait of it all, but we all deal with how do we please our advertisers, but also stay real and true to ourselves.
How does that work in like determining what covers are sponsored or not sponsored? Does it depend on the star or something like a way scheduled ahead of time sort of thing?
It can be scheduled super ahead of time. Sometimes I have had a sponsor come in literally the morning of a photo shoot and we like rush the clothes to get there. Um, so it's different every time, but we work really closely with all of the fashion brands and we know sort of the talent that they have on their minds. Um, I'm trying to think of a good example of this. Like, hold on, you'll have to edit this, but who can I say?
No worries, take your time.
I think I can say this. For example, our next issue, I think it'll be out when this episode comes out, but our next issue, one of the covers is Jenna Ortega.
Oh,
And she is a Dior beauty girl. She's literally a Dior beauty ambassador. I don't think we're allowed to put her in any other makeup, even if we wanted to. But you when you kind of know that because we're speaking to Dior all the time, uh, you know, you reach out to them or they reach out to you and you say, "Hey, we're working on this project, this cover, this shoot. Do you want to be a part of it? If so, what are you looking for?" So it's kind of this my so much of my job is just an ongoing conversation with the brands every single day, and the sponsored things just sort of fall into place. But again, we try to go really hard not into doing even if the money sometimes is amazing, doing shoots that we don't want to do. Um,
like no,
I
this
will
one's for
say,
us.
yeah, this is for us.
What are your thoughts on sort of non-traditional paths in terms of becoming an editor? Bloggers, Substack, TikTok writers, because as we have literally seen the digital uh, era birth itself.
Yeah.
Like we went out in the early days, the early aughts of the 2000s, and it was pre-social media. It was BlackBerry days. No one was taking selfies. And,
Mhm.
10 something years later, it's suddenly this whole new landscape. And it's completely changed in a lot of ways for the better, some ways not for the better. But like, how do you feel as someone who's like on the ground with that?
Um, I mean, I'm so fascinated by all the different like paths that people can take now in order to become a writer of some sort. I can be like a bit of a perfectionist, and that has stopped me from ever starting any of that stuff. I'm like, oh, I want to make a Substack, but unless I have like the exact idea or the exact angle or, you know, whatever it is, I just end up not doing it. So I'm not on TikTok because I get overwhelmed by feeling like I need to make content that's like going to go viral or whatever. I think I've posted like 3 times on TikTok, and it was when I had like BTS footage of Lisa from Blackpink or something that I just knew was going to go viral, and then I like delete it from my phone, never look at it again. Not on Substack yet. Like I'm really not great at any of those things myself, but I'm quite in awe of people who use them, and it is, I'm 34. It is people that are often a little bit younger than me, but still up to my age and beyond, because they're really like these self-starters who did not have to wait for an editor or someone to give them a byline. It's people just saying like, I have a voice, I think it's interesting, and I'm just going to start putting stuff out there. We had blogging, before. We had blogging even when we were in high school, and I mean that was taking off. That's, Brian Boy became a force in fashion from blogging. So if you think about it that way, it's not that putting yourself out there like that is new,
Mm.
so to speak, but it's just become a lot more prevalent now where like everybody is a blogger or a Substacker. I mean, my mom posts on Instagram. Like everybody is now creating content. Uh, like that's crazy, but technically my mom's a content creator just because she takes photos, even if it's of like something she knitted and puts it online. So I
Love
think
it. Shout out Karen. Hi,
shout out
Karen.
Karen.
Hi, love you.
At Sweet Karen on Instagram. But yeah, like if you think about it though, with the blogging, I mean, it was already starting to happen, but back in the day, it was like, oh, you're a blogger. That's so cool. It was like really rare that someone actually did it.
Oh yeah.
Now everyone's a fucking blogger. But I think it goes both ways. I think it's amazing that people who would not be able to get into the industry, maybe you live in Idaho and you're not able to like go out clubbing in New York where I met the editors who sort of let me in. You can still have a voice, and I think that democratization has been amazing using those platforms. I do have like a couple bones to pick with it, of course, which for one, I think that, a lot of the content that does really well is not the most, let's say, like sophisticated content or content that has a lot of thought put into it. There's a lot of Instagram poets who are just sort of regurgitating old cliches and posting them, and they get millions of likes. Um, but, in the literary world, people would be like, what is this poem? And so it's great that stuff's been democratized, but it also means that a lot of bad writing bad photos, bad whatever. I mean, who knows what bad is, but stuff that I don't consider very um it doesn't take a lot of talent necessarily to go viral. And I think that's fun and it's great. And I have a list of people who I just love as like funny online creators. But I think the worry is sort of like if bad writing can go viral, does it even matter if you're a good writer anymore? If bad photos can go viral, does it even matter if you're a good photographer anymore? And so
With AI, does any of it matter?
does any
Like,
oh honestly with AI, like is any of it gonna matter? I mean, that's one of my biggest I'm so stressed about AI. But the democratization of being able to be a content creator, writer, or whatever, that's amazing, and everybody should have those opportunities. Has the quality of content gone down because of it? 1,000,000,000%. Um, I think the other slight bone I have to pick with it is a lot of editors are actually just people who are influencers and don't necessarily have an editorial background. I'll easily get sat second or third row so that influencers can sit in front of us. So they've become so much more esteemed in fashion than editors, and like I like want to have a job, so that part I don't love. But you know, there's pros and cons, like everybody says about social media and all of that good stuff.
no, of course.
But yeah, thank you so much for having me and for being the first person to interview me. It ain't easy.
Which is so crazy. Now you know what it's like.
Now I know what it's like.